So what did you miss at Jubilee today? Well, you missed the 23rd Psalm and the story in John's Gospel where Jesus heals a man born blind. And you missed an annual meeting, which is always exciting, but it was a really good annual meeting. Lots of engagement. But before we got to the meeting, we worshiped, and as is our custom when we have an annual meeting and review all the numbers from the previous year, we took a little time to recognize those lives that helped shape our year. Those people who died, who are still very much with us in our hearts, whose presence we feel and whose influence we recognize throughout the whole life of Jubilee. We did that today. We took some time to acknowledge some dear friends and those loved ones that we carry with us. And then before we had an annual meeting, we worshiped. And so we told God a little bit about ourselves. And there's a lot going on. And then we engaged in the 23rd Psalm, and we read it in a new translation. We sang it a little bit to Brother James there. And then on behalf of the congregation, I prayed it. I prayed the truth of wanting things and needing peace. I prayed the truth of being in dark valleys and wanting to give up. I prayed the truth of being glad to have a table that is abundant and yet not always sure that I want to sit at it with my enemies. I prayed the truth that sometimes we forget that goodness and mercy are always with us, our companions and also our resources. And I confess that sometimes I don't employ them, engage them as much as I should. We did that today. And then we listened to John's Gospel and the story of Jesus and the man born blind. And it's interesting, it's a long story, and it involves spit and mud and arguing about blindness as a punishment and all of that. And in fact, the actual story, the actual healing of a blind man is a very short part of the story. There's so much more going on. So we wondered about what else was going on. Is this really a story about physical blindness? Ironically, I thought the best way to get at that was to preach in the first person, the perspective of the man born blind, a man whose blindness was thought by some to be a punishment for his parents, a man who I wonder whether he actually wanted to be healed. Everything was set for him, and it may not have been perfect, but he knew what was happening, and suddenly he has light in his life that he's never had before. And as I unwound that story, I'm hoping that people began to wonder if this is not something about faith, about seeing the world with new eyes, about engaging with God, something that we think that we want, and yet when it happens, we're not always so sure because all of our reference points are changed. All of our plans are set asunder. And yes, it does seem awfully exciting to be able to see where there once was darkness, to have light. And yet, when you can see, you have an added responsibility because you can see pain and injustice and you can't ignore it anymore. You can see hurt and grief and you engage in it and you cry. When you can see, you can no longer isolate yourself. So as the story unwound, I hope people engaged and wondered for themselves what it is that God's inviting us to see. What new sense God is inviting us to experience. What new points of reference and way of being are we being invited to as we call ourselves Christian, as we imagine ourselves living our faith, as we try to be engaged with God in the world. Oh, and we sang some really nice hymns. In fact, we sang Amazing Grace, which for some people that's the greatest, and other people it's ah. And yet today it was good. Yeah. And then, as I say, we had a heck of an annual meeting. So that's what you missed at Jubilee. But hopefully you won't miss much more because we would really love to see you. Until we do, God bless.